Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast, hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Bevens. News, reaction, and opinion. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Bevens.
Seahawk fans, welcome back to Seahawks Forever. Took a little bit of a break. You know, it's that time of year, but there is always news. There's always things to talk about. The Seahawks just wrapping up their rookie mini camp, so we had a chance to see the draft picks and the undrafted free agents in person. Some interesting reports coming out about guys looking good, guys gaining weight, guys looking strong, guys looking fast. Some guys taking it easy, including the Seahawks' first two first-round draft picks, Devin Witherspoon and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who we're going to talk about in a minute because it is my distinct pleasure today to welcome back to the show host of Cigar Thoughts Podcast, Jacson Bevens joins me again. Jaxson, are you recovered from the draft?
Just barely, man. What a fun and sexy time that was.
So we're going to start right off the top. There's something I want to do because I don't want to, the draft has been, 3 weeks now? Seems like forever. Seems like it was yesterday, though, too. And we've dissected it. We've analyzed it to death. And I will get your overall thoughts. But there's one thing in particular that I wanted to talk to you about. So you'd been talking about your love of the fit of Jaxon Smith-Njigba at that second first-round pick for a while. In fact, with the mock draft you did the week before the draft with Rob Staten, that was your pick. Yeah. And so you live streamed the first round of the draft. You got to react to that live.
Yeah.
And first of all, before I do this, because you haven't even heard this yet, I put a little something together. Looking back now, what do you make of that whole thing? Because for years, as a Seahawk fan, when we watch the draft, every time they go to the podium, we have names that are running through our heads that we want them to call, and they never call any of those names. That's changed the last 2 years. So in that moment, what's your recollection of how you felt when you heard that was the selection?
Well, I couldn't believe that there hadn't been any wide receivers taken in the first 19 picks. And so, I was super honed in on JSN the entire time. And when he was still there, this was, to your point, we talk so much about please pick my guy, please pick my guy. Right. I cannot remember the last time I felt this strongly about please pick my guy right here. I just think that I think he's clearly the best wide receiver in this class. I think that if he was able to come out after his sophomore season, if he was eligible, he would have gone in the top 10. And I say that knowing that Drake London and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Treylon Burks and Jamison Williams were all top 18 picks. I still think he goes. Yep. I still think he goes top 10. So the fact that he more or less sat out last year with his hamstring injury helped. And when they got him, I mean, it was elation. It's the perfect player for this team. He's a perfect player for any team. There is not one team. He's not a scheme dependent wide receiver. That guy is open by the time the ball hits the quarterback's hands at the beginning of a play. He fits everywhere. And I think he makes Seattle arguably the best receiving core in the NFL.
So I went back and took your episode from that night when you're live streaming.
Oh, man.
And
all
I
right.
put a little montage together. So this is a little bit leading up to, and of course, the moment when JSN was selected at 20. Here we go.
Guys, is it too early to start getting excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba at 20?
I think you honestly, you just need kind of like a fantasy pick to have.
I do.
Jaxson, if the Seahawks take JSN or Michael Mayer, name bragging rights forever.
That's right. It's Mike versus Jaxson.
That's right.
Again.
Once again.
Just like every week. All right. We are sitting here with the Seahawks staring down the 20th pick, and both Nolan Smith and Jaxon Smith-Njigba are on the board. You guys know where I'm at. I am going to be fucking thrilled with either of those two. Somebody with a Smith in their name. Just give me a Smith.
You're going to lose your mind if it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Any Smith.
Hello. Hey, is this Jaxson? Yes, ma'am.
Jaxson, hey, it's John Schneider with the Seahawks, man. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good, man. We had a great time hanging out with you at the school, bud. But we can't wait to get you up here to Seattle, okay? We're going to select you right here.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's hear it for Jaxson.
Yeah!
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Let's go!
No way!
Come on! Come on! The dream!
Oh my God!
The dream!
Oh God.
Does that bring back some good memories?
Yeah. As you can tell, I was pretty ambivalent about that selection.
So I call that. You mentioned you can't remember the last time that that they picked the guy you wanted to pick. I talked about it leading up to the draft. I call it the Owen Schmidt reaction. If you remember Owen Schmidt, a fullback out of West Virginia, I think it was 2008.
The guy who used to bash his face in with his own helmet before the game.
He was just a guy for all those reasons that I just loved and just wanted so badly. I was back in the Mike Holmgren days. There was the day. Yeah, I think Holmgren was the coach when they selected him. I think it was right before the Mora year. And he fit the offense and all of that. And I was managing a little sports bar in Bellevue at the time, and it was a Sunday. It was the last day of the draft, and I was all by myself. I don't even think I'd opened the doors yet. And I was watching the draft, and they made that pick. And I was doing about what you were doing there, except I was running around the bar all by myself like a fucking loon. And, of course, Owen Schmidt didn't turn out to be much. I think JSN will be a little bit better than that.
Here's hoping.
One last thing on JSN before we move on. I got a chance to meet his parents this week. Cool. Where I work, the Seahawks hosted. It's amazing the things they do. And I don't know what the other organizations do or don't do for these things, but they fly all the draft picks parents out for mini camp, and they put them up, and they brought them, and we hosted a dinner for them. And I try to separate my two professions, right? My two passions, and not cross over. People always ask me, did you talk to him about your podcast? No, fuck no. I'm not gonna, right. When I wait on Bobby Wagner, I'm not gonna go, hey, I have a podcast, because you know what? Right. Everyone has a fucking podcast these days, right?
I thought we were the only white guys with podcasts talking about sports. You're telling me there's others?
I think it's pretty common now. But here's the thing. If people will record a podcast once and it'll sit in the archives from 7 years ago, and they'll go, yeah, I do.
Totally.
You know what I'm talking about. I'm not to shit on other podcasters. We respect them all.
No, there's a trillion of us out there.
But anyway, but in this case, his father came up to me. He was on his way. He was outside in the hallway, and he asked me, he said, what's your name again? And he introduced himself as Jackson's dad. And that gave me an opportunity to tell him that, and this is one thing you and I have in common. I said, look, I'm a sports nut, Seahawks season ticket holder my whole life, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'm also a draft nerd and a mock draft addict. It's a problem. And I did hundreds of mock drafts throughout the offseason. And my most common, most popular favorite pick at 20, the entire process, was your son at 20. It just made sense. And I was so excited to see him take it. And his father was so gracious, and he spoke in such glowing terms about the Seahawks organization, how they've been treated. Said they really weren't that familiar, didn't know much about Seattle or the organization at all, and didn't have a lot of contact with them outside of the pro day, but they couldn't be happier with how things went.
Yeah.
And then when I went back to the table the next time, he introduced me to his mom, got to meet her, and they're not married anymore. The mom's boyfriend was even there. And Jackson's dad says, you two would get along because he listens to podcasts and he loves mock drafts. So by the time I left, his mom comes up to me and says, I subscribe to your podcast now. We'll be listening. So hopefully they're listening today, and they got to hear a little bit about your excitement and your reaction.
Well, here's the thing. Jaxon Smith-Njigba and I belong to a very exclusive club. The No K is Okay club. we both spell Jaxson in very unique ways. So good to have him on board.
When are the shirts going to be printed?
Yeah, working on it.
Yeah. Okay. I want one.
I'm going through the people that made the Let's Get Schmidt-faced shirts when Owen Schmidt was drafted.
Why do I not own one of those?
I don't know. Right now. I don't know.
Well, let's move on. Now that you've had a chance to dissect it, because now more than ever, ever since the draft went to 3 days, in some ways it's fun, it's exciting, it stretches out an event that we love and makes it even longer and bigger. But also you don't get the picture right away, the full picture. And there was,
right.
I think most of the fan base would agree, going to bed Thursday night and Friday night was a lot of nerves because they hadn't addressed the trenches. But now you get a chance to look back at the full scope, the full context of all 10 draft picks. We've gotten to hear some things about how they performed in mini camp. We've seen them put together with the undrafted free agents. Looking back now, how do you feel generally about that draft class?
Good. I think, and this isn't homerism or going out on a limb. The Seahawks got almost universal A grades from the industry with this draft. And, it highlighted perhaps more than any other draft I can remember. And a lot of it has to do with just they had so much firepower in the first 2 rounds. But the Seahawks drafted the best players left on their board as opposed to drafting for need. And we as fans, we tend to look at the holes in the hull and say, we got to patch that up first. And I think a lot of times, if those holes aren't sinking your ship, you're going to go further and faster by making bigger sails, right? Putting more wind in your main sails. And Seattle strengthened their strengths. They had an offense that overachieved expectations quite a bit last year, and they leaned into that. They had 2 rookie corners last year that performed at an excellent level. They leaned further into that. And by doing that, I think you now have a top 3 to 5 secondary in the NFL and a top 3 receiver core. And when you look at the teams that have been in the Super Bowl the last 10 years, without fail, they have elite pass catchers and great corners. They just all do. Yes, quarterback's important. Absolutely. It's great to have a good line. Awesome to have a great defensive line. All that stuff is good. Good players are good to have. But the common denominator are the people catching the ball and the people defending those guys. And now Seattle is loaded at those positions. And then in day 3, that's where they started patching up, or trying to, the holes in the hull of the ship. And they drafted 1,200 pounds of football player in their first 4 picks on day 3. I mean, just big dudes. And I really love Anthony Bradford. He is the guy that I mocked to Seattle in our mock draft show at 83. He was still there at 108. He is just an absolute monster. He lacks some footwork potentially. I think that's the kind of thing that can get coached up. You can't coach up a 9.8 RAS score, right? I mean, we're talking a top 2% athlete. Yeah. 340 pounds with a 30+ inch vertical. I mean, this crazy explosive dude. So, and then, they got their center. They got a couple of defensive linemen. They got their new Travis Homer in Kenny McIntosh, who I think is just a souped up version. They went out and they found elite athletes at almost every single pick. And that's really encouraging.
Yeah. Well, the 2 Michigan guys were one of my highlights of the draft too, because I went back and looked yesterday, in the very first live mock draft I did on the show with Michael Thompson. We had Olawatimi in the 5th round. So that was a little pat on the back there. But also Mike Morris was a guy that early in the process, he was one of the first edges that I looked at, and a guy that I just fell in love with, because I was looking at the time for guys that I was a little hyper focused early in the process on 3-4 versus 4-3, which I think we can all agree now is not as distinct of a concern. But I was looking for guys that could play that big end, and there weren't a lot of them in this class. Early on, there were guys like Zach Harrison out of Ohio State, but I just didn't see enough on film from him. But Mike Morris was a guy that I just loved the way he played with his hair on fire and just his physicality and his length, and so he was a guy that I liked all through the process. It was cool to see him be one of the picks. Were there any Creed Humphrey moments in this draft for you where there was a guy that we picked ahead of someone else that you really were hoping that they would pick?
I mean, instead? Yeah, I'll take the bait. I love Zach Charbonnet, the player. I like Kendre Miller and Roshan Johnson and Tyjae Spears and those guys too, right? You had John Michael Schmidt waiting for you there at center. And I think a lot of it is kind of Creed Humphrey redux, right? Going with like almost like a superfluous skill position player over a potentially very good center. That one, I get it. We are still trapped as football fans in a lot of ways in the 90s and early 2000s, the way we view running back, where once you've got a guy, you give him 400 touches and that's just how you go. But the physics of the game have changed so much. Those guys were running 4.6s and getting hit by 225-pound linebackers who were also running 4.6s. And now everyone's running a 4.4. Everyone's 240 pounds. Everyone's bringing just insane physical contact, and running backs just don't hold up unless you're Derrick Henry. Or Christian McCaffrey. You just don't hold up to that workload. So Seattle wasn't going to give Kenneth Walker a million touches. And Charbonnet is a perfect complement for him. I do think they're setting up a D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart type split. I don't think it's going to be a role specific deal. I think it's going to be Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, where you have fresh legs on every drive and you kind of trust these guys to handle all of the responsibilities while they're on the field. And then for your 2-minute guy, you got Kenny McIntosh, who I think is Jerick McKinnon. And, I like how they have addressed the running back room, but there was opportunity cost at pick 52.
Yeah, I think that there's always at every draft you come out of, there's things that, if you could fast forward 2 or 3 years, you're going to look back and really judge the class on. And I think that's one kind of hinge point of the draft where same way, love the player and actually like where they got him. But I was a big fan of Roschon Johnson. He was probably my second or third most.
He's Chris Carson, man.
Guy. Yeah.
He's Chris Carson.
And he was 4th or 5th round all day long. I think he ended up going in the 4th. So, that opportunity cost over a guy like Zach Pickens. So Cameron Young versus some of those other guys they could have had. That'll, if Cameron Young becomes nothing more than a rotational solid pro, one of those other guys they could have had at the Charbonnet pick. Those things, the time will tell. Plus, then they end up getting, ironically, Kenny McIntosh in the 7th, who Jim Nagy said they had as a 3rd round grade on. And so you still end up, double dipping and getting a guy in the same draft. You appease the people who say you can get great value at running back later, while also pissing off the people that say don't take it early. So
and here's the thing, right? Like we're in act 2 of the offseason. You have your first rush of free agency, then you have the draft. And then now we're entering act 3, which is there's still a lot of guys out there who weren't signed in, that first wave, who have a lot of talent, who are going to sign for less now. They're just going to have to. You're going to have all of the cap gymnastics that teams go through with their pre and post June 1st cuts. You're going to see a lot more talent hit the open market, and you're not going to be having to spend Draymond Jones money to get them. So we'll see. I'm trying hard not to close the book on this offseason, but I do wonder about the capital that they've spent so far on offensive and defensive line.
Well, and leads me to my next question. So immediately after the draft, I think all of us universally liked what they did, but still thought they were light up front. I mean, literally they were light. There were only 5 healthy signed defensive interior linemen, where last year they started on the initial 53. They had 7. Since then they've added, they signed Mario Edwards. They've added Forrest Merrill, kind of an interesting little under the radar pickup this week. The kid from Oregon that was undrafted 2 years ago from the Sea Dragons, Fioalu, who's kind of interesting. Some undrafted guys, Robert Cooper. Do you feel a little bit better today than you did after the draft, or do you still are you still hoping they add there?
No, I mean, these are roster churn guys. Yeah, maybe one of them's Poona Ford. And they rise up to the top and can be a meaningful contributor. But and Seattle has had more success than most teams at finding late picks and undrafted guys that end up being contributors. From a process standpoint, it's not ideal, but they're going to throw a lot of darts here over the next 3 months, and hopefully a couple of them stick. And the thing is like I was surprised that Shelby Harris and Poona Ford and Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson were all let go. I also don't think those guys were very good last year outside of Shelby Harris. Poona Ford had a down year. Al Woods is useful in that you can't move him.
Yeah.
And, he had some nice plays. He's an old guy, so yes, they created.
I wonder what's going on with Shelby, because, they talked early in the offseason about wanting to bring him back. He hasn't been signed, hasn't gone on a visit. There's no rumored interest in him at all. The market's kind of bottoming out now, as you said. There was a clear need there. It feels like when they signed Mario Edwards, it closed the door on Shelby Harris. And someone suggested to me the other day that maybe he had a chip on his shoulder, that maybe he was ticked off that they did let him go. Seahawks have had success bringing guys back after doing that, but I wonder what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, topically enough, it could be Jaron Reed redux. There was a lot of hard feelings with Jaron Reed leaving. They wanted him to restructure, and he didn't. And he went on to play well with the Chiefs and sort of well with the Packers, and now he's back. And we could see the same thing with Shelby Harris. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a Seahawk. There's still a couple of banks that the Seahawks can go to in Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams for some restructures and clear up some money for something like that. They already did it with Tyler Lockett. So yeah, it'll be curious to see how willing they are to kind of kick the can down the road, because last year was a build it up year, but it's kind of go time now, right? Like if you're not going to draft the heir apparent to Geno Smith, then you got to get down to the business of getting down. And NFC is wide open. I think you have two clear teams at the top in Philadelphia and San Francisco. I think Dallas is kind of in a tier by themselves right beneath that. And then you're right there. The Seahawks, the Lions, the Vikings, these are teams that are right there that can make a run at getting to the second or third round of the playoffs.
The way the roster sits today, do you think the Seahawks have gained ground on the 49ers?
Yes. Because I think the 49ers have lost ground. And that's just the nature of the NFL. I don't think they had a very good draft. They didn't have any picks till the late third round. They used one of those on a kicker. They got a blocking tight end.
Really good kicker.
Really good kicker. That's great. And they've had a really great kicker in Robbie Gould since forever, right? Like that's so at best, they're treading water at that position. They didn't add a lot of talent, honestly, in my opinion. And
even the guy
they had to let a lot of guys go in free agency. Like they got big contracts looming right now. Which is why I think that they are so hyper focused on Brock Purdy being the guy there, because he frees up so much money. If you can pay a 7th round pick at the most expensive position on a rookie contract, it does free up the money. But they have to make Nick Bosa the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history soon. Yeah. Like they've got some big decisions. They've extended Fred Warner at the top of the market and Deebo Samuel at the top of the market. They've got a Brandon Ayuk decision to make. Christian McCaffrey is an expensive running back. I think Seattle gained quite a bit of ground. I think they have a long way to go, though. The 49ers, that roster is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Let's take a look at the schedule. Just came out on the 11th. Talked about personnel. Talked about, a second straight draft class. So young team heading into this season.
Extremely.
What are your initial thoughts on how the schedule lays out?
I don't love the early buy, but that's whatever. One thing I do not buy into is, and I think every team looks at the schedule and go, oh, the NFL is screwing us. I don't think any of us appreciate the process of scheduling. What is it? 196 NFL games every week or every season, because it's not just about like, oh, we want this team to play this team on this week. You got concerts to work around and baseball to work around and basketball to work around and all kinds of stuff that you are trying to navigate while not stringing together too many road games in a row, not making sure that teams have too many short weeks. It's a really tough thing. And I think the chips just kind of fall where they're at. So initial response, I think it's a pretty tough setup for Seattle. The early bye in week 5, I don't love that. But they could very easily be 4-0 going into that. They get the Rams at home, then at Detroit. I think that is going to be a great game. Yeah. And then Carolina at home and at the Giants. I think those are all winnable. And then, after that, play a lot of good teams. Go to Cincinnati. I think Cleveland's going to be very good. You're at Baltimore. Rams on the road. You still have 2 against the 49ers. You get Dallas and Philly. There is a 4-week stretch.
That's a gauntlet. Yeah.
where you go San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia. That is 4 games against the clear 3 best teams in your conference late in the season.
Yep.
And then I think you have 3 very winnable ones down the stretch: Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Arizona. So, I think it's kind of a softer takeoff and a softer landing. And then the middle is just brutal.
You'd sure like to see that 4-game stretch broken up a little bit. It's the things I like about the way the schedule lays out, given that it's such a young team, right? And there's going to be some young players playing key roles week 1. It is kind of a soft landing out of the gate. I don't think you could have gotten much easier than, well, I'm not going to use the word. I guess Arizona at home week 1 would probably be your softest landing, because who knows who's going to play quarterback for them. Rams are still going to have a healthy Stafford, presumably Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald. It's just there's nothing else outside of those 3.
Well, and they were terrible last year, and Seattle barely won both of those games. So
yeah.
That's just the nature of McVay.
Probably the second best home opener that you could get out of this schedule. And Bobby coming back again. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. So I like that a young team gets some reasonable games and matchups coming out of the gate. And then maybe because of the youth, that early bye isn't a bad time to reset. Yeah. And then the easy finish. And again, I hesitate to use the word easy when it comes to the NFL, but everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then that 4-game stretch, it's late enough in the season that if everything goes well enough, they should have Jordan Brooks back by then. That's about the time that Schneider and Carroll they'd used John Radigan's recovery kind of as a parallel time-wise, and thought he'd be back maybe November 12th. I think he said early in November. If he comes back and is effective, maybe Brian Monet is even back by then if they need some reinforcements inside. But man, that's tough. And then everyone made so much out of, Tyler Lockett tweeted the morning of the schedule release. My sources tell me we have 3 games in 12 days. Everyone has 3 games in 12 days every year. It's just structured differently. It's Sunday into Thursday. Yeah. This year it's Thursday, or Sunday, Thursday.
Yeah. And they are adding the second Thursday game is, it's Thursday night football. It's for the fans. It's for the fantasy degenerates like myself, but it's not great for the players, and they're all in accord on that. So you hear they're going to have 2 Thursday games. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But stringing them back to back is nice. I think every team has their 2 Thursday games back to back. And yeah, you're right. It is still 3 games in 12 days. And that's something I tweeted out shortly after kind of the Tyler Lockett, Quandre Diggs stuff started going around. Bobby Wagner chimed in. There was a good counterpoint that was made, that, yes, it's normally after you play a Thursday game, you got the short rest. That is followed by 10 days of rest, that hidden bye.
Right.
You do only get the 6 days of rest after that first Thursday game. So you get 4 days of rest and then 6 days of rest, and then you play again, and then you get the 10 days of rest. So I do think I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see an elevated injury ratio on the back half of those back-to-back Thursday games this year.
Are you talking load management, Jaxson?
Oh man, I don't blame. I don't blame. God, it's so much harder to do in the NFL, right? It's so much harder to do. I think teams should be able to dress 80 guys for games. I think only dressing 46 is lunacy. But.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. It was good to have you on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
I want to give you a chance to talk about a new product, and I believe you're probably enjoying it right as we speak, aren't you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So for those of you who may not be familiar, I write an article and host a podcast called Cigar Thoughts. It's a football show, and we've been fortunate to have a lot of support over the years from people listening, and one of the things that kind of surprised me jumping out about this, when I was writing the article and it started to gain some traction, I got to thinking, like, what is unique about this process for me? And it was that I'd always smoke a cigar after the game and just kind of work through my thoughts in the form of the article. And what really kind of stood out to me is in the comments section, you see so many people asking about what cigar I was smoking and, where's a good place to get cigars? And, the most common question I get asked is, hey, I want to get into cigars. I don't really know where to start. What's a good one? And I always had this kind of dream of being able to answer that question myself. So we linked up with one of the premier cigar manufacturers on the planet and have released Cigar Thoughts brand cigars that you can order from Cigar Thoughts NFL, or just hit me up on Twitter at Jaxson Bevens, Jaxson. And I'll shoot you the details on that. But quick little pitch on those. They're 13-year age Dominican tobacco leaf, which is a crazy age for cigars. And that age lets all of the acridity get out of the cigar. It's extremely smooth. These retail, this exact blend retails when it's banded and branded by major companies at $35 to $40 a cigar. We're selling them for 10 packs at $169. So you're getting them for less than half price. They're shipped straight to you. They come with a Mylar bag and a Bovita humidification pack. So you don't have to worry about having a humidor. They'll stay good. Just keep them in a drawer or closet and you'll be fine. But they're really, really good cigars, man.
When's the bourbon line coming out?
Well, you know, I'd be lying if I say I haven't explored that. We're working on that.
And then there's the okay, no okay shirts. You got a lot on your plate these days.
I do.
That's at Jacson Bevens, Jaxson Bevens on Twitter.
Right.
Also at Cigar Thoughts. Thanks for joining me, man. We'll talk again before the season starts.
Dan, you're the man. I always appreciate it, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, hang around so I can talk to you after I sign off here. All right.
Sounds good.
Well, that's going to do it for this show.
Guys,
thanks again to
It's slow.
That's not music. Let's do this. It's like the first time I've ever done a podcast. Let's use that music again because that's called symbiosis, right? Is that what it's called? Use the same music that I use under his montage. That's going to do it for this show. I am Dan Viens. This is Seahawks Forever. Please like and subscribe. Like this video on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support the channel. Lots of growth lately. Really appreciate all of that. At Seahawks Forever on Twitter. If you ever have any questions or ideas, things that you want me to address on a show, just shoot it over to me and we'll get to it. Coming up next Monday, we rescheduled. I know I talked about it last week. Griffin Sturgeon of the Seattle Overload podcast is going to be joining me Monday. We postponed last Monday for Game 7 of the Kraken. Unfortunately, the Kraken didn't win, but great season for them. And then Rob Staten's going to be joining me sometime next week as well. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, any breaking news or anything that requires a reaction, I'll react to. Until then, thanks for listening. Okay. Hit the wrong button. Hit your thing again. So I was
It's all good, man. You do such an excellent job with this show, man.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Yeah, trying to get the YouTube thing going. It's fun to watch once you, like I was saying the other day, like once your first video really gets, you can tell when you get into the algorithm. Because all of a sudden, like I would get 200-300 views, and then all of a sudden I had one start getting every time I'd check it, it would be like 1,000 more. And it got up to like 7,000. I was like, oh, wow. It must have gotten in there. So
yeah. Well, any tips you have to kind of get that, get that sort of traction, let me know. I'm researching it too, and have a couple of buddies who, not football related, have started YouTube channels for their own kind of passion projects. And so we've just been kind of bandying about, we're all just trying to figure it out together.
Yeah. And then I want to get better about, I want to use more graphics and stuff like that. Just make it, just more visually appealing and all that kind of stuff. And like ultimately I want to get, it really doesn't cost that much money. If you've ever used Fiverr, like that's where I got my voiceover for the intro. Although I think I'm going to redo that with a man's voice. I get some negative comments about
she's sexy, man.
That's what I went for. Like when I ordered it, I was like, I want you to kind of be like the chick on ESPN, but like a little sassy. And she like, it was like, it wasn't perfect in one take, but it was cheap. So
sure.
But I want to do a video intro, and that's not that tough to build, but it just takes money.
Yeah, I know it, man. I know it. It's crazy. You got to keep Mike and I just had a long conversation because we killed ourselves leading up to the draft, introducing the video and the cigars, and Mike's chopping all that stuff up, and I was just like, man, I gotta be honest with you, man. I think we gotta I gotta chill a little bit on introducing stuff for a while, because like it's nice that in my industry, peak season coincides with the dead season for the NFL.
What do you do? But
like, I work in real estate.
Oh, okay.
And so summertime is kind of where we make our hay. And it's, I got to be able to feed the beast, man. I got to be able to keep financing this show. Yeah. So I know it's the same for you, man. If you're, do you own your place?
No, I rent.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Your business.
Oh, no. I work for El Gaucho.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. I've been in the hospitality business forever. Ever since I got out of broadcasting. So it's been 24 straight years now, 25 straight years. And I was a GM for a long time. And then I realized that that's not where it's at. And
I did fine dining for a number of years also.
Yeah. And all my employees were making more money and taking more time off than I was. And so I got out of managing in 16 and went back to bartending, which was kind of my roots. And then I got burned out on that. And so been with El Gaucho for 4 years now, and kind of knew right away that serving was where it's at there. And I love it. It's easier. It's just,
next time I'm down your way, man, I'll look you up. I'd love to come see you, and
bring your wife in.
Yeah, we'd love that, and it'd be great to, depending on when you get off or whatever, grab a drink with you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm at the Bellevue one. So
perfect.
Yeah, if you ever want to come down and have it, where do you live?
Bellingham.
Oh, okay. God, I love it up there.
Yeah, it's great.
I was born in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And,
got it.
This time last year, I was for almost a year, I was dating a Cedro Woolley chick.
So
I drove up there a lot and just remembered how much I loved that area.
Yeah, so, it's great up here.
I was like, could I live a little farther that way and do the commute? And I'm like,
no, you don't want that.
It's like 15 minutes. And it's funny. I grew up in this area. Like, I've lived in all the suburbs, but until 2 years ago, like, I'd never lived in the city. Just kind of coming out of the pandemic and everything. And I was getting out of a long-term relationship, and I was like, just found this place, and it was in my price point. It's like, I'm right on First Hill, and and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I can move back to the suburbs now.
Seattle's cool, man. I mean, they're a certain segment of the media definitely like targeted it as this, awful place that's going to hell, and it's like, the whole I-5 corridor was the whole I-5 corridor dealt with that during COVID, and still are. We're dealing with it up here, but when you zoom back out and you look at these cities in the Pacific Northwest, man, there's a reason our housing markets have done what they've done. There's just more people who want in than people who want out.
Yeah. It still amazes me, though, that with all the layoffs and all the, especially companies moving out of Seattle and over to the east side, and they keep building. Now Rainier is the new South Lake Union. Like, they're just building apartments all down.
Oh, okay.
Rainier. And yet rents keep going up. Like, I don't understand where the demand keeps coming from. Like, it's
crazy, man.
Yeah. But hey, thanks, man. I will get this all dressed up and probably out by 11:30. I'll tag you in it, of course. And
cool. And all right, if we chop up a clip or two from this and post it on our stuff, try and send some traffic your way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to do that with this one too. That I haven't been doing. I've just been, just been lazy.
Yeah, but, let me know. We'll
throw some stuff on. Try to get TikTok maybe working in my video a little bit and stuff like that. So
cool.
All right, man.
All right. Cheers, brother.
Cool. Take care.